Everyone. We have, let me see, I want to see all of you while I'm presenting. So I'm going to change my view. So typically, how many folks, this seems to be a small group, which is fantastic because I like to have an interactive presentation, more of a conversation, so it can really make sense as to how does this apply to the day-to-day. We have closed captioning. Please click in the link to open the new screen. Okay, and so to start, I would, since we have the time, I'd like to know who's in the room. And so if you could tell me your name, your title, organization, what you'd like to hope to learn in this session, and lastly, your craziest COVID purchase so far. I have a couple, so I'll start. My name's Paula Gomez-Stordy. I'm Senior Director of National Training and Technical Assistance at Casa de Esperanza, the National Latino Network for Healthy Families and Communities. We are a national resource center for Latino issues involving domestic violence and sexual assault. I am calling from Massachusetts. And my craziest COVID purchase was these really crazy blingy sneakers that I've never worn outside the house. They're like blinged out. They're just like crazy, bedazzled, jeweled sneakers that I don't think I'm going to be wearing outside. But that's my crazy purchase. So you could go ahead, or I could call on you. Next person.
I'm Erin Branch. I'm a director at the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. I've been directing this project, the Link Consistency Care Project, since it started. And I can guarantee, Paula, that the people who you're working with are earnest, curious, smart, connected. They are going to take what you help us with and move it. Let's see. I hope to learn some really practical ways to stay humble in our learning about culture and make some really authentic inroads into culture so that we're both listening and learning. So that's always helpful to me. And I would say the craziest purchase I made was a puppy.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure, you know, he is awesome. He's a great dog, but now he's 10 months old, and I just realized that I've been home with a puppy for 9 months, and he has a very distorted sense of reality in terms of what a family can provide to him. So that was not planned until we were home. So I have more lasting effects than blingy tennis shoes, I would say, from my spontaneous purchase.
Thank you.
Does it look like I'm next? I'm Nancy. It looks in my view like I'm next. I'm Nancy Radcliffe. I'm with the Ohio Attorney General's Office. I'm the project director for the Linking Systems of Care for Ohio's Youth Project. I've been with our project since we got the funding 3 years ago. I am very grateful that we have representation of diverse communities in our key stakeholder group, but I just need to learn. And I was mentored originally in this field by a really great group called, they called themselves Sexual Assault in Diverse Communities Group. And it involved the Ohio Hispanic Coalition. And I'm happy to say that the Ohio Hispanic Coalition continues to exist in Ohio. So Ohio's got some stuff going on, you know, but we need to do better. Way understatement of the day. My craziest pandemic purchase, there's just been, I have a slight issue with Facebook Marketplace, and I find the strangest things and they just really appeal to me. And so I have to stop myself. I have stopped myself recently from purchasing a cat napkin holder. It's like a napkin holder that was shaped like a cat, and some very sad and slightly, well, whatever, they were owl plaques that looked like they were tripping. And only on Facebook Marketplace can you find such things. So I didn't purchase them, but that's definitely become worse because of the pandemic. I'm on Facebook Marketplace too much.
Thank you.
I'll go. I guess it's not the same order on my screen, by the way, but so I'm Laurie Crawford, and I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and I work for the Department of Social Services, and I'm project manager for Linking Systems of Care, what we're calling Virginia Heals now. And I'm coming up on that's my dog, my 6-year anniversary actually in January. I can't believe it. So I started at the beginning of the project, and she waits till I speak to do this every time. It's the mailman, I apologize. And I, was interested in this couple of different reasons, but especially through the course of this work. Obviously, like everywhere, we have a lot of things going on in Virginia. Very interesting time to be in this year. But we have had a lot of discussions around our screening tool and implicit bias and what the data shows, and also getting engagement from different communities and cultures, and how we can, we learned basically, like in translating, getting our screening tool paper version translated, that we were, technically it was correct, but in terms of the folks who were in that community, culturally, it was not correct. It was not, we've luckily made some changes to address that, but there's kind of a lot of different reasons that I think we need to constantly keep working at better engaging diverse communities and cultures. I really have not made any crazy purchases, although a friend of mine made one that I've been considering, which is a bidet. And we've had these lengthy group, there's an application called House Party, it's kind of like a social Zoom, and we've had these conversations when she ordered it, and all the varieties of it and all the options, and some people were like, you can't go with the basic, and then she got it, and we were so proud she installed it herself, and I was like, maybe I need to buy something like that since I'm at home all the time. I don't know. So, but apart from that, nothing too crazy. But that would be a pretty crazy one if I bought it. But I'd have to go with the Cadillac if I did.
Of course. Thank you for sharing, Laurie. That's the first purchase of that kind that I've heard.
I can maybe find it for you on Facebook Marketplace, Laurie.
I don't know that I want to use one.
Okay, thank you. Next, Nancy, Rachel, Joe.
Oh, the other Nancy. So I'm Nancy Fowler. Am I not working? Can you not hear me?
Yes, I
I
can
can
hear you.
hear you.
Oh, okay. I wasn't seeing my things moving. Anyway, I'm Nancy Fowler with the Virginia Department of Social Services. Lori and I have been working on this project, like she said, since the get-go. And in my real job, I'm the director of the Office of Family Violence in my state agency. And the Linking Systems of Care project is one aspect of that. And Paula, we've been working with your team for over a year now,
Yes.
developing language access plans for all of our local domestic violence programs. And so it's really been fabulous. I didn't realize that you were the presenter for this workshop, but I'm really happy to be on here with you.
Thank you.
But so we've been definitely working with the domestic violence programs, and continuing with Lori's talk about how we translated our screening tool um, we had written an unsuccessful grant application to hire someone to be part of our team who would be much more focused on sort of the interpretation of our entire model for the Latinx population, because we, um, I don't know how to make it um, culturally appropriate. And we were already behind the curveball because it should have been developed from the beginning through that lens. But we learned so much along the way that in retrospect, we realized that. But anyway, it's been such an exciting couple of years, expanding my appreciation for having a multicultural approach, but more than multicultural. I mean, that sounds too bland. I've really enjoyed the opportunities that I've had to be very focused with specific populations and trying to make our work be what that population needs. So I just made my weirdest COVID purchase, thinking about Christmas and thinking that people don't need anything that they have to keep around because everyone's been buying cat napkin holders for the last 9 months. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to make something that's really disposable. So I thought about making pomander balls. If you remember those, your grandmother probably had them. They're oranges and they've got cloves stuck all over them. Well, I was inspired to do that because I thought, you know, if those cloves were spray painted red, they would look like that health department model of COVID. And I'm not sure how many people will appreciate me giving them a COVID pomander ball. So I went to the grocery store and could buy a 1 ounce thing of cloves and thought, not nearly enough. I need a lot of cloves. And so I went online and just yesterday opened up this very large box that has 2 pounds of cloves in it. And I thought, holy crap, I have enough cloves to make pomander balls for all of us to give to all of our friends. So I'm not really sure what one does with that magnitude of excess cloves, but I'll find out.
Thank you, Nancy. I see Rachel. Joe.
I'll go just because it's too funny. I got to follow up on this pomander ball thing. Many years ago, being a nonprofit professional, we were broke. We were always broke as hell at Christmas time, bouncing checks, you know, all that stuff. And so we had nothing to give except for we had got a box of oranges and I had a can of cloves. So I made pomander balls for all my family. And first of all, let me tell you, your thumb gets really sore pushing in those cloves. And secondly, just about as we were ready to leave the house with our pomander balls to go to the family gathering, if you have a cat, keep them away from the cloves, because my cat got into it and like I have never seen, like Exorcist projectile vomiting all over like the gift wrap I did have and all of that. So word of warning, keep the cats away from the cloves. I'm Joe Simonson. I work at the Ohio Domestic Violence Network on the Ohio Linking Systems Project as the project manager. I've been in the field for, I think I'm on 28 years in domestic violence and violence against women and violence prevention, and 17 at my agency, and then I helped write the proposal that got the award for Ohio. So I have a long history with the project. I picked this particular group because a few years ago, I got to do some technical assistance provision. I got to be the provider of technical assistance in Pomona, California for Futures Without Violence. They were working on the HHS pilot sites, demonstration sites around the country on the Specialized Services for Abused Persons and Their Children grant. And Pomona was struggling a little bit, and I had some things to offer that might be helpful to them. But I also knew how out of my depth I was in terms of the cultural competency around the Pomona community and being very, heavily Latino community. And I've only been to California one other time too. So I just was really wow, this is new. I got to work with Josie Serrata, who used to be with Casa de Esperanza and is a wonderful outcome evaluator and really thinks about outcome evaluation from this cultural lens as well. And I got to spend, I think, 3 days with her, and I would like to spend 3 months next to her because she helped me learn a lot. She was generous and gracious. And the main thing I learned is what I don't know. So that's why I'm here. And my craziest purchase, there was a panic about meat when all the meat packers were getting sick and all of that. And so the first time ever, I jumped and I bought a half a side of beef. So I'm up to my eyeballs in ground beef and roasts. And I might have to buy another freezer if I ever do that again. So that was my craziest COVID purchase.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Rachel? If you're speaking, Rachel, you're muted.
She's the closed captioner.
Closed captioner. Thank you, Rachel, for closed captioning today. Okay, so that's everyone. Thank you. A lot of interesting purchases. Hunter, you're helping us. Are you with technical? Are you also participating or no?
I can do both. I'm the site manager for the Virginia site, so I can attest you've got a power group here because I know everybody in the other states too. So just a little housekeeping on that. Is everybody seeing the slides? Okay. And Paula, you've got two different ways. You should have control. You can either use the arrows on your keypad to move it forward or back. And if you have arrows, that's probably the best way. And if not that, then if you float over on your screen, Paula, to the very left corner, a little faint bar shows up that gives you arrows to advance the slides.
Okay, so I don't see the arrows at the bottom because I have a bar on my computer, and I have the presentation. I have two monitors. I have this laptop in front of me and then a monitor behind it as I work. So I wanted to have the presentation on there, pulled up, and have the presentation here. So when I do that, it proceeds in the one that's not on screen. So I'm just going to get off of that and then now do my arrows.
Very good.
Okay, so it works. Okay, so I'm going to move. And Hunter, did you want to say anything else?
Oh,
Yeah, can we hear purchase, Hunter?
my weirdest purchase was, I will admit that I bought a Power B-Day at the beginning of COVID, and it was a good move. But my strangest purchase was a butter bell, a ceramic butter bell that is only $10, and it keeps butter at room temperature. You put a whole stick will go in, kind of like and then you put it in a little container that has water at the bottom, just a little bit of water. I didn't grow up with these or know about them or have any exposure to them. Maybe common to other people, but I can't get by without that little butter bell, because you just lift it up and you got fresh spreadable butter anytime you want. $10 on Amazon.
Another item I've never heard of before. That's great.
Butter bell.
Butter bell. So last but not least, I see on my screen Ramon Pastrano.
Yeah, I'm just momentarily here, just listening. I will be speaking tomorrow. I will be leading the section, leading with cultural competence and the IDI. So thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So great. It's nice meeting all of you. Some of the things that were discussed about culture and language access and translation, cultural humility, those things I will talk about. There are some slides that I'm just going to go very quickly. These slides I'm hoping that will be shared with you, and I don't want to read anything to you because you can do that. But I would like to have a discussion as it applies in our work, because this work, as we're doing cultural awareness, competency, responsiveness, and humility, it is really an internal process. And that's my dog. Sorry about that. Yeah. Maybe it's a crazy COVID purchase. So, like I said before, I work with the National Latino Network. There he is. That's Otis, my dog. I work with the National Latino Network, and it's a national project out of Casa de Esperanza. Casa de Esperanza is a domestic violence program that started in 1982 by 5 activist Latinas. And they founded this program as a shelter, and primarily. And since then, it has grown to be the leading domestic violence, Latino domestic violence organization across the country. I'll be talking about engagement. We have a culturally responsive community engagement, which is different than outreach. Outreach is necessary, yet outreach is different than engagement, and I'll talk more about that. Our philosophy is, and what we try to do as a national organization, is to uplift and highlight the creativity and wisdom that is in community. And we believe that it is community that will have the answers on how to eradicate domestic violence, because it is communities that has the wisdom and that have the understanding of how intimately issues are impacting them. We know that institutions are important and they have services, but institutions will not end domestic violence. It's everyone's role to end domestic violence. So our mission is to mobilize, and Erin, I see your doggy walking through. What a cutie. Our mission is to mobilize the Latino community to end domestic violence. And we believe that community and social capital is essential in doing that. It's not moving for me, Hunter. Okay, so it is here. So the national network, we refer to it as the NLN, has 3 to 4 areas. Go back. It was delayed in my clicking. It has 3 areas. One, Joe, you mentioned Rosie, sorry, no, you mentioned Dr. Serrata, Josie Serrata. And we have a research department that is culturally responsive and really ingrained in participatory research, where community has a say in research design, in scope, in findings, and then how to disseminate that research. We also have a public policy department, and that's our senior director, Rosie Hidalgo, and she's out of DC. And we also have throughout the country training and technical assistance. I believe it was Nancy who talked about the trainings that we have done with the state of Virginia. And a lot of our staff, we had about three staff that participated in that. And what we did with Virginia was to do webinars, but what I think is so critical when we're doing this work is the TA. So they would do the webinar and then have a TA session where it was a conversation. So, okay, you had the training, so how does this apply to your everyday? We have staff in Texas. We have Dallas, Houston, Austin, also Florida, Virginia, myself in Massachusetts, and Atlanta, Georgia, and also Puerto Rico. And then our local team is in Minnesota. So we approach the work as a human rights issue, noting that safety is central to the survivors, and safety is unattainable unless we practice cultural and linguistic competency consistently as organizational and individual level. So I'll go over that as we move forward. Could I have you, Hunter, move the next, since I'm having issues with it, there's a delay. And just, I'll say next slide.
Did it do it?
Yeah, thank you. It was perfect. So I'm going to use some time, quite a bit, on this slide and the next slide, talking about the Latino community within the United States. And so we're about approximately 17. This is from the 2012 US Census, and that number is closer to 18% right now. But approximately 53 million Latinos are living within the United States. It is a heterogeneous group, and I'll go into much detail about that diversity within the Latino community. And that would also give you some insight on, as you're doing engagement, as you're doing translation, where in the country are you, what Latino community is in your community. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then 34% of Latinos in the US are foreign born, and the majority, 65, are US born. So when we say immigrants, or when we say Latino, not all Latinos are immigrants, right? We have 65% of Latinos, the majority, living here in the US. And although there might be issues that are cultural issues within the culture, there may not be experiencing issues that come from immigration. Maybe their loved ones do, but they themselves may not. And it's, we call that mixed family status, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Which is my next bullet. Many families have mixed immigration status. 75% of children in immigrant families are US citizens. So that means that the child was born here, the parents were not. The parent might have a visa. The parent might not have a visa, might be a permanent resident, might be in the process of attaining their visa or citizenship, might or might be undocumented. And so I'll talk more about that in this next slide. Next slide, please, Hunter. So when I say the community is heterogeneous with lots of diversity, this is what I mean. So it's a lot of variables here. And so Latino, there's, you know, sometimes I get the question, so what is it? Is it Latino? Is it Latinx, right? Is it Hispanic? So what is the appropriate word so I don't say the wrong thing? And so what I would say is all of them. I'll break it down a little bit more. So, and it's important to note that Latino is a cultural reference, and it's not race. And so within the Latino community, there's multiple races. So that there's Afro-Latinos with African descendancy. There's indigenous Latinos, and there's Caucasian with light features and so forth. And there's also a mix of that. Similarly to the United States, Latin America was colonized by Europe. And so there was that oppression of indigenous people. And there were slaves brought to Latin America and also the Caribbean countries such as Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. Puerto Rico, my bag, it's not a country, but there was the slave trade happened there. And so that even within the Latino community, there's multiple races and there's mixture of races. And there's also racism within our own community, right? There is culturism, colorism, right? Or shadeism, as it's referred to. Ethnicity and country of origin, there are about 22 countries that speak Spanish. And they all speak it differently. And so years and years ago, about 26 years ago, I was a victim witness advocate at the district attorney's office here in Suffolk County in Boston. And my parents are from Chile. I was born here in the United States. And so I was helping Spanish-speaking survivors, victims of a crime. And I met with the victim and I said, I read the police report and it said assault and battery. And usually I would talk to the survivor to see if there was any other information, to see if the DA needed to bring additional charges and so forth, or if there was evidence that was missing. And when I said to her, can you tell me what happened last night? In Spanish, I heard her say, well, we started fighting and then he gave me cookie. That's what I understood her saying. So obviously he didn't give her cookie. And so I knew, because we were from different countries, that she was using a different word. And so I said, oh, so how did that happen? Can you tell me how that happened? She said, you know, we were arguing, then he went like this to me. And then I thought, oh, okay. Okay, that's where the assault happened, that he slapped her and punched her. And so just within language, there's diversity. And then there's also diversity where we have indigenous languages in different countries, in Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua. There's a variety of languages, and sometimes indigenous languages, and sometimes if they may speak a little bit in Spanish and there's a Spanish interpreter, it may not be reliable communication and authentic communication, where the survivor is really expressing it, where we're getting all of the detail about the story of the survivor. So it's important to know. Religion, although there's a large number of Catholicism within the Latino community, there's, or rather Christianity, there are some Latinos who are not affiliated with the church or not Christian, and they're Jewish and Muslim Latinos, and also atheist. And so I want to go back a little bit about the word Latinos. You've seen Latinx with an X at the end. And so that term is used a lot within activist groups in academia. And it was used, the X was used to be gender inclusive. And so, or gender non-conforming. However, when using the word in community, and by community, I mean down the street, right? And speaking with folks, if you're going to a store, the X wasn't really used in community, but it is used in academia and activist groups and in nonprofits to be inclusive of gender. So there is also a pushback to the Latinx with the X, because the X is not, the Spanish is more consistent to use vowels instead of consonants. And then especially the X. The X is difficult for someone to pronounce, is harsh to pronounce. So it was more English dominant. So there's this dialogue, and there are some individuals that identify as Latinx. So my answer to you, which is part of what we'll be talking about in terms of cultural humility, is to ask the person, as we ask individuals, or when we state our pronouns, or what pronouns do they use, what is it that, how do they refer to themselves? Latin America and some folks in the United States use the ES at the end to be gender inclusive and also to be mindful of the Spanish language. So Latines, it sounds like the X, but that is the inclusive way that the word has been used. There's also folks, Laurie, yes, thank you.
Yeah, can I ask a question? Because we've had a lot of discussion around this topic,
Yeah.
specifically, and kind of back and forth, because as you said, there's a lot of people who use Latinx, and then there are people who are strongly opposed to it, because we've heard kind of some arguments like you're trying to Americanize, you're trying
Right.
to, the language. And so we've gone back and forth, and I understand what you're saying in terms of asking, but what if you're doing like you're doing toolkit items, resources, that kind of thing? There's not an opportunity to ask?
Right, that's a good
So
question.
for a screening tool, or if you're referring in, a protocol that's for service providers, like, what would your recommendation be if you don't have the opportunity to ask, but you're trying to be as inclusive as possible?
That's a great question. For us, the National Latino Network, we use the @ sign. In Spanish, it's called arroba, because it looks like an A, and which is feminine, and it looks like the O, which is masculine. And so we use both. However, recently countries in Latin America and in the United States, some groups are using the ES. I would suggest maybe doing a listening session or having some more research around your area. Sometimes when I'm speaking to an audience that is Latino, I would say Latino, Latina, Latines, as I'm doing in general, right? At the beginning. And then,
you said yes, as in ES, not X.
right.
Okay.
Right. And if someone says, I identify as Latinx, and then that's the word that I would use. Because, which I will get into, is it's their culture to have grown in the United States. And the X, they might not even speak Spanish. And the X is important to them. Right? And so that I would respond to that, right? Because that is their identity. So when you are an organization putting out a tool, and we have a citation, and at the bottom we explain why we use the @ sign, right? For us, that's Esperanza. It's something that you might consider, or whatever you choose to do, is to put at the bottom, or to have a statement of why you choose that, and what was your process of choosing that. And did the community have a say in that, which is what I'll be talking about with community engagement.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So there's the other word, Hispanic, right? And then, so for me, I grew up in Chile and also Boston. So I use the word Latina. And Hispanic to me resonates. There's some undertones of racism when I hear it because of the context in which I grew up. However, in the West of the country, it's Hispanic is used just as Latino is used. So it's not to say that one's offensive and one is not. It's a lot of identities that we have in our community.
So, Paula, is this,
Yeah.
are we at the point that we begin to ask in the same way that we ask about people's preferred pronouns?
Exactly.
Ask how they would like to be referred to as?
Exactly.
Okay.
And
it's just a hard balance, because I don't want to be offensive in asking.
Right, and to say there's an understanding that there's diversity within the community. What is the word that you use to identify yourself in the community, right? And to state that you understand that there's diversity within the community and that you don't want to make assumptions. But in terms of an institution and the product, it's important to have a thoughtful process on what words to use and how to use it, and to have community members part of that process, right? Sexual orientation, there's diversity within sexual orientation as well. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer folks, same as sexual identity and expression. And there's the Trans Latina Coalition out of California. That is a great resource, and they have done great work in supporting survivors who are trans women and who are Latinas. As stated in the last slide, there's a different immigration status and immigration experience. So I wanted to pause here about the immigration experience. When someone outside the country is looking to come to the United States, they need to apply with their government for permission to come to the United States. And you could have a tourist visa, you could have a work or education visa, or you could be married to someone, K-1 visa. So, but you have to ask for permission. It is very costly, and you have to have economic status. You have to prove that you are not coming to the United States and leave everything behind. So do you own a home? Do you own a car? Do you have a vacation home? Do you have family living here in the country of origin or living here? So the experience is very different. If there's someone that doesn't have those resources, someone there's many reasons why people come and migrate. They might be reuniting with family, which is one of the most common reasons why people migrate to the United States. It could be for education and employment, but it could also be fleeing abuse, fleeing persecution. If there's political warfare, if you're a trans woman, let's say, or the political affiliation, and you are being persecuted, you would be running, and you could even have apply for refugee status. However, there are individuals that come to the United States undocumented. And that experience and the immigration experience is very dangerous. And if you think about it, it's someone that has saved all their money. They're paying someone to support that coming over. Lots of women and children and even men experience crime. They're victims of crime. They are at risk of sexual assault, of domestic violence, of robbery. I've heard stories of survivors that have lost children in the process of coming, that they're running for days. And so to note that immigration experience, how someone came into the United States, has also an impact on their trauma and the accumulative trauma that they have experienced. There are also differences with first generation, second and third. So someone who comes here as an immigrant, and then the next generation who is born here is first generation, and then second generation. And so for someone that I said, they might identify with the term Latinx and may not even speak Spanish. They came and they were born in this country, or they're second generation, third generation. To know that that's going to play a role. The size of the family, there's a stereotype that there's the large families, which is true, but there could only be small families, or maybe two people from the family were able to come here wanting to reunite with their family later. And stages of acculturation. So acculturation means learning a culture and being able to navigate a second culture. So that is someone already having their culture, their cultural norms and habits and beliefs and language, and then having to learn a second culture, and not only learn by speaking English, but then being able to navigate that culture. So there's a large process of acculturation, and usually parents that are immigrants are not learning and don't have the exposure during the day as children do when they're interacting with peers and learning, and they haven't had all these years of learning in a different, in the country of origin, that their process of acculturation is much faster than the parents. And then there's a conflict between the parents and children around culture and around parenting. Where someone lives in the United States. So I've heard Virginia, Ohio. I am in Massachusetts, and I can tell you, doing national work, the fact that I'm from Massachusetts comes out even more. And so there's a Boston culture, right? I would, before COVID, every time I would take an Uber and to go to another state, the Uber driver would say, "Where are you from?" And I would say, "From Boston." And I'd always get, "You don't sound like you're from Boston," right? Because what you see, and yes, we do speak that way, is dropping our R's, right? Talking like, "I don't care," "Oh my God, the car," yada, yada, yada. However, there's that, but there's also a culture in Boston too that's very, we get, I've heard that we're cold, and we don't have that Southern charm and hospitality. I remember going to Atlanta and taking a walk in the morning and having people say hi to me, and I'm thinking, do I know them? Like, why are they saying hi to me if I don't know them? That's very, Boston, New York, right? Just minding your own business, not even sometimes making a connection or even acknowledging that someone is there or in the elevator. So there's the culture of origin, country of origin culture, and then the culture within the United States. And this is a lot, but in looking at culture, I really wanted to stress the multiple areas in which there could be difference. And this is within the Latino community, and I would say with every other community. Economic status is huge, and there's a difference. There's people that had status in their country of origin, and because of political warfare, they had to leave everything behind and then come here, and their degree isn't valid here. And it's a very humbling experience to be, washing dishes for a doctor, or a doctor who's now an interpreter. I've known a couple of doctors who have interpreters, or who was an attorney, or who owned their business, or who worked in the government. Education, there's lots of diversity and political affiliations, and especially with this last election, Latinos are voting both sides of the aisle. So there's diversity. Any questions, anything that you'd like to state? Anything about, if you're thinking about the Latino community within your state, what countries are represented? Can you tell me what countries are represented in your state?
Mexico, Honduras, a little bit of Guatemala,
Colombia,
Puerto Rico.
a lot of Colombians in Columbus, Puerto Rico. I've heard some people identify as, oops, sorry, I'm talking too much. I'm gonna mute myself. We've got a large, Columbus has a large, we have a large community in Columbus where I live.
Okay. So Mexico, Puerto Rico. So Mexico is the largest. Sorry, Joe?
I added Guatemala and Honduras too.
Guatemala and Honduras. So when I hear Mexico, the dynamics of folks with Mexico, and again, there's diversity, but they is adjacent to the US, right? And there's the part of the experience is going sometimes back and forth. When I think of Guatemala and Honduras, it's Central America. If you think of the political warfare and war that the country has experienced, right? And you go even like 80s, and the trauma. And so how did when did the person come and how did they come would impact their trauma. And also with Puerto Rico has had hurricanes, earthquakes, right? And now COVID. And how are they coming? Why are they coming? Right? What was the impetus of coming over? And to think about that experience and the family and how that is impacting the family. Whatever, if you're privileged or you don't have resources, whatever the experience is, know that it's an experience of loss. Right?
We were working with a woman who was a domestic violence victim that's incarcerated because of some child endangerment issues with her children related to all the violence in the home. And that brings a whole nother dynamic, because where those children live once she's incarcerated, is a whole nother ball of wax, and she may never ever see them again.
Right.
And so, she had a very small circle of people that she could trust with her children.
Right. So you bring up a good point with incarcerated or survivors that are in detention. And so you've probably heard safety planning, right? You know about safety planning with victims of domestic violence, but when it is someone who is undocumented and they're a victim of domestic violence, also that safety planning includes what do we do in the instance that their parents are detained? Where are the children going? What is the plan? And that the parents have a say in that plan, and that when working with immigrant survivors that are undocumented, that is part of the safety plan, is looking at that source of immigration.
Well, there might have been other more suitable, better places that her children could go, but she was afraid to name those places because those people were undocumented.
That's right.
Really difficult.
That's right. And so there's fear, also fear of calling the police. If I call the police, I'm going to be deported, or my partner is going to be deported, or even if they come into my dwelling, folks that are living with us may be deported. So I just want to do a time check, and I can't believe we're at the hour, so we have 15 more minutes. Okay, so I'm going to move forward. This is really important to talk about the diversity within the community, and that one size does not fit all. So Hunter, could you please forward some slides until we get to cultural humility? The other way.
I'm getting that bad buzz again. I don't know if it's...
I hear a buzz, yeah. Oh, sorry, Hunter, if you go back. This one right here. Okay. So folks talked about humility and talked about cultural competence. So cultural competence refers to learning. So if you think of the word competence, in order for me to know, okay, that someone's from Guatemala, what happened in Guatemala, right? So I could learn a lot about that culture. The focus is on learning, right? And so that's competence. Responsiveness is now that I learn, how do I respond? What I learned about this community, how are our policies, our practice, our programming, is it supporting that experience, right? That is cultural responsiveness. What we want to all strive for, however, is cultural humility. And cultural humility is just that. As professionals, we are in a position of knowing. Knowing is very important. And when we are engaging culturally, it's important to not make assumptions, because assumptions get in the way. And so instead, to learn and to be curious and humble, and learn in the survivor in front of us, the individual guides us. Because if you Google Chile, not anymore, but if you Google Chile government, there was a dictator in Chile in the 80s who killed many people, and who was then thrown out of government, and who was awful, right? Killing all these people. And knowing that, and if you know that I'm Chilean, that would be a source of conversation maybe. However, in my family, I have one side of my family where my father's cousin was killed. He went missing, and the police was not giving any information. My grandfather was in the Air Force and found him that he had in fact been killed, and he had been shot. And so lots of people on the side of that side of my family have strong opinions about that government. On my mother's side of the family, my grandmother had the picture of the Pope and a picture of this dictator. And to her, this dictator was the best thing, the best thing coming, because he was orderly and he believed in order. So that slide of where I said all that diversity is to not to make assumptions about where someone is coming from. So the competence tells you what happened in Chile, right? The responsiveness tells you, okay, based on that, maybe we should say this to be trauma informed. But the cultural humility, it's a process of learning that never ends. Does that make sense? And that's what we want to strive for. But that we know that there are these variables of differences, and that by engagement, we'll learn that. And that we can then be culturally responsive and culturally appropriately responsive, right? So next slide, please. And I want to go to the slide that says outreach or engage, right here. Thank you. Thank you, Hunter, reading my mind. Outreach or engagement. So we're really focused at Casa Esperanza on engagement. And that's very different of how we do the work typically. And engagement is a relationship with community members. So what kind of relationship do you have with community members? How does your organizational policies and structures support community and getting people involved? Could you go to the next slide, Hunter, with listening sessions? We can skip that one. You can read that. You can skip that. So what we do is listening sessions. Most of the work that we do, even all of our staff is Latino, Latinx, right? But we don't have the same experience as Latinos across the country. So what we do to develop our tools, we always have the community members as having a say. And we ask questions. We just ask questions, basic questions, and listen. We then analyze the data. We share it back, which is extremely important, so that whatever we're involving the community is in, that the community benefits from that knowledge. And lastly, which is very important, is we act. If you're not able to change your policies or programming based on what you listen, it impacts the community and it impacts the community's trust. And then word spreads, right? So if you're not in a position of changing policies, programming, then it's best not to do the community engagement and listening sessions, and instead do outreach. Outreach is what you're doing from your organization, sharing out. Community engagement is having a dialogue, and it is being aware of the imbalance of power. As professionals in an organization, we have power. So it's being mindful of that and having a conversation and sharing sometimes, which we're told in the domestic violence field that it's a boundary issue. So we can't share. Community engagement, it is leveling that imbalance of power and having a connection, a conversation, and listening. And if we're not able to then change our policies based on listening, outreach is a better model because it will impact the community's trust in the organization. Okay, so we have about 7 minutes. I want to go, Hunter, to the video. What I was going to talking next is about our language access work. We do TA, as Virginia knows. We will work with you, have a conversation with you. Hold on one sec. Yeah, have a conversation with you about how to build a language access plan for survivors, right? We have on our website, we have a toolkit. But I just want to show this video so we can discuss. Think if a survivor that this is a mother who is going, speaks English, who is going to the hospital because her child is sick. Think this as someone who is not able to communicate with professionals, and it's a life at risk situation. And let's, in the hat of thinking about that this is a survivor of domestic violence. So Hunter, if you could please play the video. That's a tough video. Apologies, I should have, should have said that it was difficult of being a parent with a sick child. And when this, I was asked to do this training on It's Beyond Translation, right? So we could have our brochures translated, we could have our websites translated, but if we don't have a comprehensible plan on how to react and protocols and policies so that we're not reacting in a crisis, because we're all then stressed, right? And we're all petrified. And we're then thinking about language in a crisis. In order to avoid that, every organization must have a language access plan. And in fact, if we receive federal funding, we have to have a language access plan. Even if one area of our organization receives it, every part of the organization must have a language access plan at every entry of the organization. And so it goes beyond translating brochures and translating websites, but who is the staff? Who are your resources, your translators? And are they trained in trauma? So I just wanted to get some thoughts about the video, what resonated with you.
Was painful because we presume, those of us who speak English in the United States, we assume this grand privilege, and to see someone who is an English speaker not knowing how to, in that position of not understanding, it's a harsh reality.
And I think I was just thinking how many times I've been in a setting like that where someone looked distressed like that, and the judgment and the people talking about her in front of her without being helpful or sympathetic.
Well, and even the well-intended person trying to use their clunky translation or interpretation skills or language skills, you know, because we do that. We're like, find somebody that